distinguished colleague from Wisconsin, Mr. Duffy.
Gentleman from Wisconsin is recognized for 5 minutes.
I appreciate the gentleman from Florida yielding. I think it's important that we review the history of federal employee pay freezes. In the last Congress, this came up under a Democrat-controlled House, Democrat-controlled Senate, and a Democrat president. They voted for a 2-year payroll freeze for federal employees. They rightly excluded our military. I think everyone in this House agrees that our military should get a pay increase. But who they wrongly failed to include in the pay freeze was members of Congress. They didn't include members of Congress, but every other federal worker they did include. And so now today, I brought a bill to the floor to extend the pay freeze for 1 more year. And my bill is the exact same bill as the Democrats' bill from 2 years ago. The only difference is that I've carved in members of Congress. Every member in this House will have their pay freezed just like every other federal worker. That is the right thing to do. That's what should have been done 2 years ago, but was not done. I was here to listen to the gentleman from Maryland, the former majority leader, who is outraged that he doesn't have an opportunity to singly vote for a pay freeze for members of Congress. But as the majority leader, he had the opportunity to include members of Congress in his bill. Republicans didn't have a say. It was a Democrat House, Democrat Senate, Democrat President, and members of Congress were not included. And now to come here today and be outraged and say that the Republicans are disingenuous because we have carved in members of Congress doesn't hold water. I think it's important to also look at the facts behind federal employees as they are compared to the private sector. The Congressional Budget Office came out and they've said that federal employees make 16% more on average than the private sector. And at this point, what the Democrats are saying is in a very difficult economy, when the private sector, who is really the American taxpayer, the ones who have been forced to take concessions with regard to pay, the ones who have been asked to work less hours to keep their jobs, my friends across the aisle come to the House floor and say, what we want these American taxpayers to do is to not get a pay raise themselves, but to pay for a pay increase for federal workers who already make 16% more than they do. That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense. And I hear a lot of conversation from my friends across the aisle about fairness and parity. Well, I think you should start to use the term fairness today. There should be parity between the private sector and the public sector. I come from central and northern Wisconsin, and we have a large manufacturing sector in my community, in my district. And time again, there's rules, there's regulations, there's red tape, there's taxes that attack our way of life that come from this town in Washington, attack the way of life of Wisconsin. And we bring it up, we talk about it, we complain about it, and guess what? My friends across the aisle, they turn a deaf ear to our complaints. But today, when we're going to do a 1-year extension of a federal employee pay freeze, they are outraged by that. They are listening, they're advocating, they're arguing for more federal pay. Come on. Use fairness today. Use the argument of parity today. This was your bill. This is a 1-year extension. The final point. The President's Debt Commission, Simpson Bowles, they said we should have a 3-year freeze on federal pay. That's what my bill does. I don't want the argument to be that my friends across the aisle, they don't really care about the federal employee pay freeze, that they only care about their own pay freeze, because that is the only difference. The only difference in my bill is that I've included members of Congress. This makes sense. Let's come together. I think the American people are sick of the partisan bickering. And they would expect that there's issues on the left and the issues on the right that this House could and should fight about. But I think they're sick of common sense issues that come down in the middle that we should agree on. Let's get together. Let's pass this bill. Let's freeze federal employee salaries for 1 more year. I yield back.
Gentleman from Maryland.